these conversations and lost track of time. Okay, Rob, we'll start off with the third step prayer, sir.
You got it, my friend. Third step prayer, page 63 of your big book, everybody. Who makes it all possible? God. I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Okay, we are actually on page 93, but we're going to back up just a paragraph here. Rob, we will start on page 92, and it is the section there where it says continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness.
You've got it, sir. Page 92, everybody, right near the bottom. Continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story, unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, of the traits of the alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he is alcoholic, so much the better. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question, if he will. Tell him exactly what happened to you. Stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that he does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles.
Yeah, this paragraph, as I read it, one of the things that I think that pops out or jumps out at me is that in fact that if you have a sponsee or a newcomer that is this curious and has made some of the connections that you've been trying to make up into this point, and all of a sudden they are now curious, they are interested in how you got well and are willing to at least admit that they are interested and or willing to find that higher power, that inner strength that they're going to be, that's going to be necessary for their recovery. What a place to be, because I guess in my mind, it's an exciting time for the sponsor or the person that has actually grasped everything that's explaining stuff. You've connected. That's really what I'm trying to say. You've made that connection. You've sparked the interest in this person. And because of that, you now have somebody that is very interested in the solution, which is a nice place to be. You've really done a lot of, you've accomplished a lot in a little time, which is really what the goal is. This is what we all want to achieve as recovered alcoholics with newcomers and sponsees. We want them to be interested. We want them to be curious. We want them to now want to get that solution and apply the principles that are a part of all of this. Now, you want to keep the attention focused, okay, mainly on your personal experience. You're still going to be explaining some of the things that you did to get better and how you applied the program that's outlined in the book to the solution of recovery. And you want to keep stressing some of that with the struggle that they go through with trying to continuing to drink. This also is very serious, and that's one of the things that Rob and I will stress time and again about this illness, about this disease, about this condition, and that is that this is actually a very serious thing, even though we try to have some fun and some levity with regard to how we explain and kind of go through things and the communications that we have between each other and that type of thing. And I think it's also important because there are some people in the fellowship that we all talk about, which is the, put the plug in the jug, that bumper sticker kind of recovery that doesn't really work with anyone because it never answers the questions that the newcomers and the sponsees have. But the point being is that you don't want to stress that this is something about your God, about your higher power. You just want to stress that they should be willing to believe in a higher power. You can call it God, you can call it a higher power, whatever you want to do, but just stress that it's going to be their conception of it and not yours, not everyone else's, et cetera, et cetera. And again, if they actually do say, I'm willing to believe, then you've achieved another milestone with regard to bringing somebody along, not necessarily slowly, but methodically. And that's kind of what we're trying to achieve here, is just a methodical kind of progression to bringing a person along so that they are agreeing with you as you're going along. And that is persuade through involvement. Remember, I talk about that as part of the approach to things, is focus on the individual and their needs, persuade through involvement. Okay. And that means that as they get, bought into things, then that's when you can say, and you've earned that right to advance to the next thing. So that's the third part of it. That's the earn the right to advance. So focus on the individual, persuade through involvement, and earn the right to advance. And this is at that point in time where you have persuaded them through involvement. You've gotten them curious, you've gotten them to agree, and you've gotten them to also look for this solution for themselves. Going along. So quite a bit here in this paragraph here, and it's a great place to be. And it's one where I know, as an individual that's been there a couple of times, more than a couple of times, is that it's an exciting place because at that point you've got somebody that's truly interested and very curious about moving to the next step. Rob?
Yeah. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rarely loath to tell alcohol patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. If you remember in Bill's story, Dr. Silkworth spoke to Lois, Bill's wife, and said that if Bill continues the way he's going, he is going to die of delirium tremens. Bill overheard this, and fear sobered up Bill for a short period of time. It did not keep him sober. Okay. He knew that there's a possibility that he could die. Now, this is the doctor telling the wife, not telling Bill, but telling the wife. Now, on page 93, tell him exactly what happened to you. Squiggly writing. Must be important. They paid extra money that they didn't have to get this book published. So the whole idea is that when Bill met Dr. Bob, Bill talked about his own drinking career and how it affected him and what happened. And Dr. Bob, by listening, was able to relate to Bill. Dr. Bob said he would give Bill 15 minutes. They ended up talking for 6.5 hours that night because Dr. Bob could relate to Bill and his drinking. So we can relate to another alcoholic because we understand what they're going through. So we're on page 93, everybody. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language. To describe spiritual principles, there is no use arousing any prejudice he may have against certain theological terms and conceptions about which he may already be confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are.
Yeah, essentially what we're trying to do here is try not to be very God focused and higher power focused and pushing it and overwhelming the individual with your conception, with your beliefs, and trying to sway this person in that regard. So what you want to do is be very, very gentle in the conversation. Be very focused on them. Remember, this is their conception, not yours, and that this is a higher power. Some people call it God, some people call it something else, but the point being is we really are focused on a higher power inner strength that's going to be necessary in order to be able to overcome this illness of drinking and drunkenness. So the other thing that you can do is that you can always go back to the spiritual experience section back in the back of the book on page 567, just to bring them along a little further so that they start to understand what you're talking about. The book basically has the answers that you need to have in your hands in order to explain things. So you don't have to guess, you don't have to stumble through it. You can actually just refer to the book and do that. So just a quick note on that. The spiritual experience is going to be something different for everyone. And so you might describe what your spiritual experience was, what you saw, what you felt, what you experienced, and giving them an example and making sure that it's just an example, that there are others that have different types of experiences themselves. But again, use the book to your advantage, use the book to answer the questions so that you don't feel like you've got to come up with the answers and stumble through it. Rob?
Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he'll be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice the very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We're dealing only with general principles common to most denominations.
Yep. So we'll emphasize that last part of it. It's that we are represent no particular faith or denomination. Okay, all faiths, religions, etc., and beliefs are welcome. And working in general principles common to most denominations is absolutely vital to trying to explain this spiritual experience, this complete psychic change that you're going to go through, etc. Now, I underlined these couple of sentences. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. So it's more than just your belief in a God. It's more than just your faith. It's more than, we're not talking about the type of religion that you practice when you go to church or read the Bible, etc. We're talking about something completely different here when we're talking about a spiritual experience. They are related and completely related, but it's just a different concept here that we're talking about, and that is the giving yourself over in such a way that you allow your higher power to guide you in ways that you've never done before. So belief alone is not going to be sufficient. Faith alone is not going to be sufficient. Religion is not what we're talking about. We're really talking about something that is spiritual, and that's where we really want to make sure that we're emphasizing. Even if this person is a study of religion and has a great grasp of the concept of religion and God and faith and etc., they can still use that to their advantage because we've already got somebody that's willing to believe, and that's a good place to be. You can go back to We Agnostics. And that chapter is really a great chapter for not only agnostics, but also the true believer. And that is another emphasis here, is that same person that's a true believer can benefit from going through the chapter in We Agnostics. And that's a great place for you to try and ground this idea of a spiritual experience with this person going forward. Rob?
Beautiful. We're on page 94, everybody, right at the top. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are now endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcohol when he escapes his own difficulties. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Make it clear that he is not under pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, where he has helped you more than you have helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Maybe you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions.
Yeah, and a couple of highlighted areas here. First of all, this being a vital part of your own recovery. Really, if you're sitting down with a person and you're at this point in time explaining the concepts of the program, the details, going to page 63 and looking at some of the stuff that in that section, talking about the Bill story, highlighting some of the ideals of the different steps, et cetera, et cetera. I challenge each one of you to stop for 2 seconds and say to yourself, am I even thinking about drinking at this point? And I'm going to say to a person, the answer is going to be no. You are actually getting better by doing what this work is prescribing, by working with another person. And when you're in the thick of it, which is where you are right now, and you've got this person that has grasped the concept, that is interested in the program, that wants to understand the process, and also that is willing to believe, you in of yourself is probably at one of your strongest points, that you're going to have that defense against a drink, period. And that's a testament to this working with others. It is, there's nothing works better than working with another person in keeping you from taking a drink. And it's so important to be able to take and carry this message forward to someone else, even if all you're doing is getting somebody connected to someone else. The fact that you got involved, the fact that you are now helping somebody, I personally have a sense of responsibility to that person not to drink. It's kind of an interesting thing. It's not only that I don't feel like drinking, it's also one that I feel a responsibility to the person I'm working with to say, I'm not taking a drink. And because I'm working with you, I'm now stronger in that conviction. And suggesting to this person that the welfare of other people be ahead of his own. Now, this is really that point where you're working on your step 4 and 5 and your step 8 and 9, and those concepts there where you are focused on other people. You get into your step 11 where you're praying for how to be better served to other people, and that's that concept there. And also, there's no pressure. It's one of the misnomers is that, I had a sponsor that wanted, a phone call a day, multiple text messages. There was always this check-in, and there was this rigidity of how to follow his process. And I felt like I was, answering to dad. I felt like I was, in one of those areas where I felt, obligated to be a part of this person's life. And somehow, some way, I just felt uncomfortable because it was like, wait a minute, that's not, I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to get sober, and I don't need to be, I didn't feel it was necessary to be that connected and that obligated to another person. This is really tough for some people to do. They feel like that they have to be the ones that affect the other person's sobriety. Remember, folks, this is up to the individual. They're the ones that are going to have to find that inner strength. They're the ones that are going to rely on their own higher power in order to get sober. It's not your responsibility for them to get sober. It's only your place to prescribe the program, explain the process, be available as a guide, and help them through each of the steps, et cetera, et cetera. And if they get it, then great. And we are all testament to that. And we've had other people that have helped us get through that. And that's exactly what that is. It wasn't that my first sponsor didn't get me sober. I didn't get sober until I started really digging into the program myself and really adhering to what the process was. The hopeful part of this, if they are reluctant to continue forward, it's okay. It's not a failure on your part. You've really done more for yourself, which is really one of the goals, and that is to increase your own strength in sobriety. And if you've made a friend, if you've left the door open, there's a good chance that they're going to come back, knock, and step through, and you've got them working on the program. Rob?
Yeah, and the St. Francis Assisi on his poem or his blurb, it is in giving that one receives, which is an incredible thing. It's by us giving of ourselves that we are receiving. Remember, the whole idea of step 12 is that it reinforces in us what we need to do in order to stay sober. Okay, if we're not helping others, we're not doing this program. So it all comes back to what can I do for others? Practical. I'm going to go to page 89 for a second here, just to read the top because it is so important. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcohol. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. This book is littered, as we've read before, about step 12. By helping others, we're helping ourselves. Remember, we cannot keep another person sober. That is between them and their higher power. We are a conduit. We teach them about this program. If they want it, they will do the work. If you, just like we had to do, we saw in others what they had. And if you're willing to do what they did, you will get the same result. And that's what is so important. And as Leo eloquently said, if they don't want to continue, that's up to them. We've done what we can, and we always leave the door open. Remember, Bill, in one of the stories that we read about, the person went to the hospital 6 times. Each time they went to work with them. You remember, it's a desire to stop drinking. We work with these people if they have a desire. We do our best, but it is between them and their higher power, whether they stop drinking or not. But the most important thing is it reinforces in us what we need to do in order to not drink. Your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. Do not contradict such views. Tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If he shows interest, lend him a copy of this book.
And that's a good way to read that last sentence there, Rob. Lend him a copy of this book, but I will just say, don't lend him your copy because you need it for your own reference. But at the same time, you've probably made enough notes and marks, and you've got tabs and sticky notes, et cetera, in there that it wouldn't make sense to the person that would be reading that book. So that's just if you have an available book, lend them the copy. If not, give them the resources as to where they can find a book and help them get it. Sure, there may be some reluctance, and so that's okay. The fact is you had some reluctance at one point in time perhaps. And if you did, then it's one of those things that you want to share with them and say that, yep, I was there before and probably would not have progressed as far as I have and been as successful as I am had I not um, cleaned house and done my steps. And then we're talking here really about the steps 4 and 5 and 8 and 9. There are other steps in there, but certainly this is what we're trying to talk about in that regard. And that is a thorough and honest assessment of yourself and the problems that you've created for yourself and others, and then who those people that you have harmed in one manner or another that we've talked about in the past, and what you might do to make amends. So the idea right there is just to talk about it at a high level. Okay, at this point, we're not trying to get into the weeds because you're probably going to lose the individual if there is any level of reluctance. But this is a point in time where you want to bring up some high level kind of generality type comments that would apply. Rob?
Yeah, if it's your first visit, take it slow. Don't ram the program into them. You know, they're already confused about life in general. So just take it slow, take it easy. Unless your friend wants to talk further about himself, do not wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he has trouble later, he is likely to say you rushed him. You will be most successful with alcohol if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. Show him how they help with you. Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him that if he wants to get well, you will do anything to help.
This is another sales technique, and that is that you basically are putting the carrot out in front of them, but you're making the stick and the line just long enough that they can't necessarily reach it right off the bat, and you want them to try a little harder to do so. So with this, you at this point, and you can kind of see this subtle change, and that is that now we're asking this person to talk about themselves, and it's past the point where you're talking about yourself. So we've kind of made a transition there that was subtle in the last 2 to 3 paragraphs, because remember it says keep talking about yourself as you're going along. Well, now we're asking this person to talk further about himself, and if they are willing to do that, then be a good listener and let them talk. The other message here is to not necessarily, the person wants to jump right into it. Again, just like Rob said, bring them along slowly and methodically. The idea is that, and I've seen this in one of the people I used to work with, and that is that all of a sudden I get this call, they're overly excited about how they have made this connection, this recovery has happened, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, this person's got a little over 7 or 8 days of sobriety. They finally got this whole idea, and they think that just by talking about this, that they've now achieved recovery, and they haven't really done the steps in the manner in which they're intended. And lo and behold, this person went right back out and drank just a few days later, and was devastated by the fact that they thought that somehow they had it. And it's important for you to make sure that they come along a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, and step by step. And that's this idea, is that sometimes they are anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let them do so. Sometimes is a mistake, and sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It's really dependent upon the individual and where they are. If you this isn't a crusade, and that's part of it as well. That's the great word to use. We're not doing a crusade here. It's if remember, you had second thoughts. You had contemplation and very retrospective kind of approach. And it was in that slower, more in-depth thought process that you really grasp the ideas of where you are and where you're going. And if you remember that you didn't jump in with both feet and all of a sudden everything just changed. It took some time. There's a lot of effort and there's a lot of work that goes into this. It's not hard work, it's just work, but it has to be done. It has to be done in a certain way, meaning very genuine and honest, and that is important. When they also talk about never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop, I can remember me trying to grasp this whole idea of God being involved, being very reluctant and resistant to that, and trying to talk to one individual, this man, about it. And all he kept wanting to do was to continue to pray and push God as the answer to everything. And I just had a hard time. So this person and I were not connecting, and part of it was because he was talking from a spiritual hilltop, and really just pushing the only concept that he had, which was this is all about God. And again, this is the second time in as many paragraphs that it talks about offering and friendship and fellowship, and that you've essentially made a friend, and he'll be more likely to follow your suggestions. You will do anything to help, and that's really where the final thought here, as far as that is concerned with this paragraph. Rob?
Yeah, we tell the newcomer, where are the good meetings to go to? Introduce them to people. Show them, what goes on at the meetings. Take them to the meeting. Show them exactly what goes on and how they can become a part of it. And as I say, the most important thing is make them feel comfortable. Because the hardest thing is that we come in and we don't understand what's going on. We don't know what this program is all about. So just try to make them feel a little bit more comfortable. Take it slow and take it easy. The other thing that I love and is simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. When an apprentice starts on a job, you don't just let them go at it. You assume that they have some knowledge of tools, but you know what? When somebody's got a screw and they pick up the hammer, you got to tell them, what, there's a special tool for that. And what I love about this book is the spiritual tools that we have for all different situations. When I have fear, I have a prayer that I can use in order to make myself have the fear go away. When does the fear go away? Now. Okay. I like that, Lejean. And there's other kids, when somebody, the sick man prayer, how to master resentment. That's another tool that I can use. There are so many tools that are in the book that we show them, how to deal with things in everyday life. When somebody cuts us off on traffic, we can, go back to our instinctual life, and we race up to them, we cut them off, and boy, do we feel better? Not necessarily, but we got even. You know what? No, now we have spiritual tools that we can use. You know what? That person must have been in a hurry. Maybe there's somebody sick at home. We give excuses, we give reasons why maybe they're doing what they're doing. They didn't mean to cut me off. I just happened to be there. Okay? I'm collateral damage. And you know what? What happened? Maybe I had to slam on the brakes. But you know what? I'm okay. Everybody in my car is okay. The car in front of me. And this is what is so good about it. In step 11, Tony from the Keystone Group always said, do you want to be in the accident or do you want to miss the accident? And I always hold that close to my heart because it makes sense. I don't want to be in the accident anymore. I want to miss the accident. I want to just go on my way, get there safe and sound with all my loved ones. And that is what it's all about. And that's what I love about the spiritual kit of tools. And if anybody wants to talk about the spiritual kit of tools, I love the spiritual kit of tools. I will talk about it 24/7 if you want to. So if you ever want to talk about it, please don't hesitate to contact me. If he is not interested in your solution, if he expects you to act only as a banker for his financial difficulty or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. This he may do after it gets hurt some more.
Yeah, this is just a quick note to kind of identify with somebody that's not really interested in the program at the time. They're not interested in the process, and they're kind of truly not interested in getting sober. They're just in between drunks, and they are basically looking for a handout of some kind. And in that regard, that's not your intended position and or role. And in that also is a point being is to not waste your time with an individual like that, because we're really not here to bankroll someone or provide them as a nurse for their sprees. Now, it's situation dependent. If somebody needs a place to get sober, and you're willing to provide that place, let's just say it might be, a spouse, it might be a brother, a sister, it could be a son or a daughter or something like that. Certainly, it's up to you in that individual kind of process of allowing something like that. But remember, that is not what we're talking about here. This is not part of recovery in the sense that you're trying to provide a safe place for somebody to get sober. It might be the beginning of getting somebody into the right frame of mind in order to be interested in the program and the process, but it's not really part of the program and process in and of itself. And remember, it's not, nowhere in this book does it say spend your money and your resources on somebody and that's going to get them sober, because it really isn't. It just isn't. So just a quick note there. Rob?
Yeah. If you've been in the fellowship for a while, you've probably met people that are like this, who just want another $20. And what happens is they make their way through the group, and then when they can't get any more, they end up going to another group. It's happened to me, so be it, you learn. Okay, Bill here is giving us, a reason not to work with somebody. They don't want to get sober. Okay, we don't, you don't waste your time on somebody that just wants to use you. And there are many in the fellowship. So, just be aware of it. This is the great part about this book. Bill is helping us out here. Now, remember, when this book was written, it was published in 1939, Bill took people into his own home. A person committed suicide in Bill's home. They turned on the oven and they asphyxiated themselves in Bill's kitchen. We live in a different time now. We don't usually let strangers live in our home. Okay, we have shelters, we have detox centers, we have hospitals for these people to go. There's nothing wrong with us driving somebody to one of these facilities and to help get into them. Okay, but we usually don't let strangers live in our homes anymore. So just remember the time frame. If he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within.
Yeah. So if he's sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interim. We also have worksheets that are excellent for individual time, where they can take those worksheets, go through the book and answer questions. And it is a very methodical way of going through this process. And it's a great way to kind of set as a primer for further discussions going forward. And it gives the sponsor or the one that has been experienced something to work with as far as that goes with the new person that they're working with, whether they are a sponsee or just a newcomer trying to get some interest and get started. Now, this does have to be a personal choice. It is something that comes deep from within, and if he's going to find his higher power, that must come from within. So it's another important point here to make that he should not be pushed into this, prodded and or cajoled, because in the end, that's going to backfire. And the individual is going to form his own resentment to the whole thing. And then once the resentments are starting to mount and are created, the person is probably lost, at least for a while. Rob?
Yeah, in the 1930s, they read books quite quickly. There wasn't television, there was radio, obviously, but trying to get people to read nowadays can be very, very difficult. They become overwhelmed. They feel, well, I'm not back in school, this, that, and the other thing. I usually try to break it down so it's a lot simpler. Try to read a chapter. Okay. Well, I don't read well. Well, okay. Then on YouTube, they have they have the talk where somebody will read it to you. So there's other options. And, we assume everybody is really well educated, etc. But I was surprised at a few people that came into the Fellowship of AA who could not read. And, it's a learning curve. We just assume that everybody is, either high school educated or university nowadays, but that's not the case. People get left behind, etc. So we have to adapt to each situation. So as I say, YouTube has the talks where somebody will read the book to you. So we adapt and we learn. But I usually try to break it down a little bit slower. Read a chapter if you can, and then we'll go through it together. Because this is a textbook. Okay. If you have ever tried to read this book by yourself and tried to pick out the important points, I found it very, very difficult. Okay. So I'm not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but I do shine brightly sometimes. So I just want you to know that. So, there's other people that, have difficulty with it. So please keep that in mind. If he thinks he can do the job in some other way or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us, but point out that we alcoholics have much in common and that you would like, in any case, to be friendly. Let it go at that.
Yeah, this is very simple, very straightforward. The person has to be willing on their own to honestly and thoroughly go through this process. If they feel like that they can do it differently, if they can go a different path or want to do something else, don't hold them back. Just encourage them to follow their own path, but make sure that you just remind them that we all have stuff in common. And so, with the program that worked for you is always available to them, and just let it go at that. It's pretty simple here. Again, it's just reinforcing the idea that you're not going to grab onto this person and pull, yank, and cajole them along. It's not going to work. You're just going to build resentments, and that's just going to backfire on you at some point. So, that's really what we're saying here. On page 96, this whole paragraph I highlighted because it's so important, and I've labeled it that is for the relapser, but it is something that I think is important for a person that's working with others to understand and grasp. Rob?
Yeah, I love how the fact that we have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. They leave it open. Some people, the crystals, acupuncture, a whole bunch of other new wave medicine, et cetera, has come out that people, believe in. And, if it works for them, perfect. Hey, you know what? The idea is that we stop drinking and that we change our lives around. And that's really what it comes down to. So if somebody wants to try something else, by all means. And if it doesn't work, we're always here. I'm always here to help you. So page 96, everybody. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. You find We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance.
Yeah, and this is really a nice reinforcement to the individual, the sponsor, the person that has recovered, that's working with others, to one, not be, don't chase the one individual ad nauseum. If they're not really willing to work with you in the manner in which this program is prescribed, don't waste your time. It's okay. The fact is, you've probably increased your own strength and defense against a first drink and your own sobriety, and that is an accomplishment and a win. Move on to the next person, and always leaving the door open for the individual. If they want to come back, and a lot of times they do, then you've got them in a better place, and you've gotten the opportunity to work with other people. So don't, again, waste your time chasing a person who cannot or will not work with you. And again, this is really important for someone that, especially that's just starting out to work with others, because we all want that. We all want them to get what we have. We all want them to get sober. We all want them to recover. Everybody that we work with, we want to have a success. And so it's just not going to happen. I mean, I'll be proof positive. I wasn't successful in quitting drinking and becoming sober and recovering with my first sponsor. Again, it wasn't necessarily my sponsor's fault, because this is up to me. It was me and my program. They were just trying to provide a process and a guide to that, maybe a little bit more forceful than I was willing to accept, but that's okay. The fact is that I finally found recovery, and I finally made the connection that I needed to make. It just took some time. But thankfully, the people weren't pushing it on me at that point in time. I got it on my own. And that's really what's important, is to remember how you got there, and some of the reluctance you had, maybe some of the relapses that you went through, and et cetera. But again, this is important. Focus on that individual. If they're willing to move forward, great, work with them. If they're not willing to move forward, then don't waste your time. Move on to the next person, but leave the door open. Rob?
Yep. He often says that if he continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others. Okay, that person was Bill W., our founder. It didn't work. He tried with a whole bunch of people, and it didn't work. Okay, but he persevered. Okay, so don't be discouraged if it doesn't work at the beginning. We think, well, we're not doing it right. Well, you know what? A lot of times it's the person that you're working with, they're not ready for it yet. They haven't hit what we call bottom. Okay, they don't realize that they are beyond human aid. That all the work that they try to do by themselves isn't going to work. Remember Bill went to treatment 3 times. Okay, sometimes it takes a lot in order to get somebody to the point where they are willing to do whatever it takes. Suppose now you are making your second visit to a man. He has read this volume and says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. Having had the experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. Let him know you are available if he wishes to make a decision and tell his story, but do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult someone else.
Yep. So you've got somebody that's now interested. You are making your second visit. They've read at least part of the book. They're interested, and are prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. That's an excellent stepping off point, starting point. You've achieved that interest and that curiosity within the individual, and you're ready to kind of move to that next step. You are at that point where you have to make a decision. Are you the right person to take them through this? And more than likely you are. We'll just be positive in that regard, that there is a good connection between the two people. And that is an important part of this. This is very critical. Again, I'll refer back to my first sponsor and I. We just didn't connect in the manner in which worked with me. Nothing against him and his program or his process. It was just not the one that I worked with, and much better for it now. But you are available to work, but with this person. But if they would rather, if they're ready to do the 12 steps, but they want to work with somebody else, that's okay as well. By the time that you've gotten somebody at this point, they've probably gotten to know at least one or two other individuals that have sparked their interest and piqued their curiosity. And it might be that those people are better suited, personality wise, etc., to work with them. But it is just something that you want to make available for that individual. If you guys have made a good connection, things are working well, things are clicking, if you want to say that, then go through that process with them. Rob, then we'll bring Bill in.
Yeah, it's 12:52. Do you want to bring Bill into it now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Bill, if you would bring a few words here at the end.
Hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. Very good presentation today. There's a lot of real good stuff in here that we went through. What Bill is doing, he's giving us instructions here on how to deal with somebody when we first start talking to a new person. That's basically what he's doing. Now, try to remember when you first came in, what it was like on your first day. That's basically what we're trying to get to here. You know, and he's giving us all different instructions or suggestions on how to deal with these people. Basically, he's saying, tell them exactly what happened to you. That's what he told us on the top of page 93. Tell the person what you went through. Tell them what happened to you. And then he says we got to use everyday language when we're describing spiritual principles. Don't try to confuse anybody with big words. Just talk as simple as you can. Explain the program simply to them. That's all. And on the bottom of page 93, it says, to be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. That's also information for us. That's not just something that you tell to a newcomer. He's also giving us instruction here. In order for our faith to work, to be vital, we have to accompany it with self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive action. That means in order for the faith that this program is going to keep me sober, in order for that to work, I have to take action. I have to try to help other people get through this process. That's what this whole thing is about. You know, he's got so much information in here on how to deal with people. And on page 94, remember, everything that he's telling us here is on the bottom of page 94. It says, on your first visit, tell them about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is talking about the first time when you're seeing somebody. Again, remember what it was like when you came in your first day. That's what we're dealing with here. This is not somebody that's been to a whole bunch of AA meetings and knows something. Back in the day, they only had 2 meetings going on when this book was written. And when they were dealing with somebody on their first visit, the person either just came out of a detox or they just came off a park bench somewhere. So you have to remember, you can't shove this program down their throat and say, here's this book, read this book, and then, then call me when you're done. That's not going to work. If they did that to me the first day I walked in, I would have turned around and left and not come back anymore. Basically, we're trying to make friends with the person, show them fellowship, and try to get them interested, and so that they can understand that we went through the same thing they went through, and that they're going to want to know how we got through it. And like Leo mentioned on the bottom of page 94, it says, lend them a copy of your book. It says in the book, your copy. That's kind of outdated. When they wrote this book, nobody had a book yet. The book was written before the book was printed, so nobody had a book. And they didn't realize that everybody was going to have all kinds of notes and everything written all over their book, and the pages would get all ripped up and bent over and all that kind of stuff. I mean, in northern New Jersey, where I'm from, it's like a badge of honor if you go into a meeting and you open up your big book and it falls apart. Everybody says, "Oh, wow, look at that. That guy really used this book a lot. Wow." You know, people do that just on purpose, just to try to show off. If you gave me a book that was falling apart when I first came in, I would think you were nuts. I wouldn't want anything to do with you. So it's a good idea to keep a few brand new books in the trunk of your car or whatever. And if you're going to give a person a book, give them a new book. Don't give them your book. You got all your secret notes in there, you're going to lose them because the guy might not come back again. You know, and plus he probably won't be able to read them. I can't read half of my own notes that I wrote, and I wrote them. So I could just imagine some poor new guy trying to read my book. He would probably scream and run away. So don't give him your book. Give him a new book. And on page 95, it told us it's a mistake if the person is anxious to proceed at once. And remember, we're dealing with the first visit here. You know, you explain to a person what you went through and what you did, and they say, "Oh boy, okay, give me the 12 steps right now." This is the first time they walked into a meeting. That's going to confuse the living heck out of them. That's going to be a mistake. Just tell them, "Hey, you want to get better? You can follow along in our footsteps and do what we did, and we'll walk you through it step by step and show you how to do it." And then it says, simply lay out the spiritual kit for inspection. Now remember, the spiritual tools, the spiritual toolkit, that does not come with batteries included. Your spiritual tools need to be plugged into the power in order for them to work. So that's something for us just to remember. So basically what he's doing, he's giving us suggestions here and instructions on what to do with a new person. And remember, the new person is somebody that doesn't know anything about sobriety, anything about recovery, nothing about AA. At the time when this book was written, you know, they didn't have rehabs where they walked people through some of the AA process before they got to meetings. They didn't have that kind of thing. All they had was a detox. The town's hospital where Bill came out of, basically that was just a drying out place. They didn't have any kind of counseling or therapy or anything. They basically dried the person out, got the alcohol out of their system, and they said, "Okay, you feel better? Well, if you don't drink, you'll keep feeling better, so don't drink anymore. Bye, see ya." That's basically all they did back then. They didn't really have any kind of programs and counseling or anything to take people through. So when they dealt with somebody on their first visit, they were dealing with somebody that was totally green and knew nothing about this. And then it talks about here on page 96, it tells us it's a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If someone won't work with you or they can't work with you for any reason, like Leo said, you leave the door open, but you're wasting your time trying to work with somebody that doesn't want to work with you. We've all run into these people in meetings. They come, they're just looking for coffee and donuts, and then they want to go hang out in the back of the room where all the girls are flirting with all the guys, and they're using it as a pickup joint. You're wasting your time trying to explain the steps to that. You got somebody sitting up at halfway up and towards the front of the room that's shaking apart and wants to know how to stop drinking. That's the guy that you run over to and you approach and you try to explain the process and take them through it. And if the other guy in the back of the room decides he wants it too, you leave the door open so you can always help them. But if they're just there to fool around and use AA as a pickup joint or whatever, and they don't want to work with you, you're wasting your time trying to work with somebody that doesn't want to work with you. So basically, he's just giving us instructions here on how to deal with newcomers. Because if we don't deal with newcomers, AA won't exist anymore. We have to help the newcomers. And so what we're doing here and what Bill is doing here, he's telling us how to deal with people when people first come in. And remember, it was a different world back then. Like Rob pointed out, they didn't have TVs, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have video games. So if you do give somebody a book, they were probably happy to get it and they would read it, because that's basically the only thing they had back in the 1930s was they either read a book or they played checkers. You know, they really didn't have TVs and internets and video games like we have. Today, if you hand the guy a book the first day he walks in a meeting, he'll probably throw it away. Or they'll take it home and put it in the closet and never read it, because we have all kinds of other things to to keep ourselves occupied with. Back in the day, the only thing they had to do when you were bored was either read a book, you know. So it's a little bit different dynamics today than it was back then. But basically, we're supposed to be there for the newcomer. Somebody that wants this program, we're there to explain to them how it worked for us. And if they realize that it worked for us, they're going to say, hey, if it worked for this guy, and this guy drank just as bad as I did, maybe it'll work for me too. You know, it's like a sales technique. You're trying to set the hook and get them involved. And that's really what we're doing here. And that's what Bill's doing with this. All right, thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Rob. I appreciate all that you do. Let's go ahead and close out with the serenity prayer, and then we'll open.
You got it, Leo. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.